And we are live. We're back, guys. Welcome to Rankable episode 49. I'm your host, as usual, Jared Thomas, Senior Account Executive at iPullRank. I'm joined by my terrific, one of the best demand gen managers in the game, Garrett Sussman. How's it going, brother?
Yo, what's good?
Doing good, man. Thank you for always being here, man. Thank you for everything, man. And we have a very, very special topic today. So what we want to talk about, guys, is product-led SEO, and we've got one of the masters here. So we have a special guest. He's an SEO expert, a consultant with more than a decade of experience driving successful SEO and growth programs for leading B2B and B2C companies. He's worked and helped companies like WordPress, Shutterstock, Blue Now, GetAround, Mixpanel, Zendesk, and many others, and helped them build and execute global SEO strategies that increase organic visibility at scale. And he's also the author of one of the top-selling books around SEO. Product-led SEO is the name. And I'd like to introduce our guest today, Eli Schwartz. How you doing, brother?
Hey, great to be here. I love hearing that intro. I was like, all right, did I write it well enough?
Man, but thank you for having us, man. Thank you for joining, taking time out your day, man. We're super excited to have you. I know we was already starting in the green room. We already started a great conversation. If I want to start, usually how we start the conversations is learning a little bit more about your background. So I'd love to start the topic of, when did you get into SEO and kind of where did your passion come from?
So it depends how far back we want to go.
Let's do it.
It depends. He starts with "it depends," of course.
God, I hate that I say that. I think it is the worst thing people say in SEO, and I'll just come right out and say it right now. Like, I hate when people say it depends because, like, if you're a consultant, you're getting paid to give an answer. It's like if someone, all right, this is terrible, but morbid. Like, you go to an oncologist and you're like, am I dying? Well, it depends. So like, well, I'm going to go find another doctor that's going to tell me whether this is going to kill me or not. Like, as a consultant, I'd rather say like the wrong thing, but be really confident in it and be like, look, there's a 99% chance I'm right. And then sometimes you're wrong. Be like, that was the 1% because you're getting paid to be confident. And if you're an in-house employee and your boss or your boss's boss says, all right, what's going to happen here? And you have no clue, but then you say it depends. You're like, I'm going to go hire someone that knows. And then you tell them. And like, especially when it's a CEO, they're not really like writing it down. Like, oh, you guarantee me this thing's going to happen. So anyways, all right, that total tangent. How'd I get him to start an SEO? So I always wanted to work in Silicon Valley and live in Silicon Valley. And I moved out to Silicon Valley, 2006. And I took really the first job that came to me, and it was at a company called Quinn Street, which helped people that wanted to get a certain service, like a mortgage or their windows fixed or credit card debt fixed. And then they helped the businesses that wanted to buy those leads. So I was kind of in the middle working with affiliates. And I hate to say this, but I say it all the time. It's sort of like the sewer of the internet. Like, someone had to connect really. They had to be connected, right? Like, people wanted to go to University of Phoenix, and University of Phoenix needed them, but then you had to do all sorts of dirty stuff in the middle to get those traffic right there. And like, I had my own little small part in the subprime crisis in 2008, where I was like, we were paying $150 to our affiliates that had leads that were like, 200 credit score, and we paid $4 for like an 850 credit score. Like that's subprime right there. And that didn't make any sense to me. When they explained it, I was like, all right, I'll go with it. That's what we're going to do. Anyways, so I'm working with these affiliates, and we're sending them like $50,000 a month checks. And I'm like, well, how did you drive all this traffic? And they're like, SEO. I was like, all right, your job is way more fun than mine. So I just like sat with them and had them teach me what they were doing. And I started putting up my own sites. And at the time, you got everything from Google. So I don't remember what my first site was. And like, I didn't know Google Analytics existed. So I would go into logs and I'd see the queries people put in, like individual queries. Google passed those into the logs. Like, one person searched one thing and it would be crazy. And I'd be like, wow. Like, I'm talking like sentences, like, how do I kill my dog so my husband doesn't know? Like, things like that. And I was like, why would Google send traffic like that to me? What happens if I make that like a title tag, or what happens? And I was off to the races there. So then what I did was I changed my resume and I said I'm an SEO. And I had no idea what that meant, but neither did these other people we were sending $50,000 checks to.
Wow.
So I started interviewing for SEO jobs, and until I convinced someone that I actually was an SEO, and I got hired as an SEO. And I was working at this startup and doing all the things that you do in SEO. This is a long time ago. I had a massive budget. It was like, today it would be like a paid marketer's budget, but this budget that I had was to buy links. So like I had like 30, I think at one point in time I had $50,000 a month to buy links. And that was SEO. Like I went and bought links on these sites that don't exist anymore and optimized
PBNs.
No, the PBN still exists. These were like broker sites.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And that was, and then I was like working with, we had real content. Like that was the way we did SEO. It was journalistic content, but like this is, I'd have to convince a journalist to change things. And that's really where I learned SEO. But where I really got my, like, let's call it a bachelor's degree in SEO was when we got hit by Panda. We had to recover from Panda. So we lost like 65% of our traffic in one morning. By the time all was said and done, we lost 80% of traffic. So we went, this is a long time ago, so it doesn't sound like a lot of numbers, but we went from like 400,000 visits per month on one site down to like 60,000. Like it was just obliterated. And we had advertisers that were like, had already bought this traffic and we weren't going to get this traffic anymore. And like learning how to like recover from that was like my bachelor's degree in SEO. And then from there, once we recovered completely, and that was like, I got all my technical SEO, I went over to SurveyMonkey where my role was, I was hired as the first SEO that I ever had in this 12-year-old company and, huge brand. And I came in with like, and I put all this in my book. I came in with like all my bright ideas on how to do technical SEO and how to, be really smart. And I'd done this, like I recovered from Panda, I recovered from all these penalties. I grew our traffic. At the time, I don't know if I was speaking at conferences yet, but I felt like I knew something about SEO. And then like my very first week, and this is like the first thing in my book. So if you read my book now, you can skip the first few pages. But like I come in with this great idea and this engineer tells me like, no, and marketing doesn't get to tell engineers what to do. And that was it. My spot was completely blown up. And then this was my graduate degree in SEO. And like, that's why I wrote my book on how to get things done. Like working within a company, like I'm in a big company now. Before I'd been in a startup. Now I'm in a company at the time that are 100 people. Now SurveyMonkey is like 2,000 people or something. How do I get all those people to do the things I want? They don't care about best practices. They don't care about SEO. They don't care how it works. They don't care about links and like how to make all that happen. And by the time I left, 2/3 of global revenue was coming from organic. So like, that was, learning how to do that. That really changed my perspective on SEO and really like, all the dirty things I needed to do weren't necessary because like Google wanted to send survey traffic to SurveyMonkey. It was about like, how do we make that happen? How do we teach Google what to do? And, being at a big brand like that, I learned the value of things like links. Like we got links every day. We had links from every single government in the entire world. So we had links from every single educational institution in the entire world. We got a link from, this is one of the first things they did. We got a link from the White House that pointed to a 404 page. So I fixed the 404 page. I put a page under it, and you know what? It didn't do anything. So like I could say with authority that like a whitehouse.gov link doesn't do much. And in the subsequent years at SurveyMonkey, I got 2 more links from the White House. One of the times, Trump's Secretary of Commerce, he ripped off a complete post from the SurveyMonkey blog, links and all. So we got all those links in there. And you know what? It didn't do anything. So
that's hilarious. That he like crazy. Ripped off the links and did
most about SEO, like the underpinnings of how things were working. Working in a brand like that, where like Google was one of the investors, there were people at SurveyMonkey who thought they could reach out to Google and ask questions, and sometimes Google sort of answered, and I was able to parse what they meant in those cases.
Wow, that's an amazing story. You know what's crazy too? Quinn Street, I worked with when I first came into digital marketing. My first job, it was actually one of my biggest customers. So shout out to
the internet. Am I right?
Yep. Shout out to Quinn Street. Shout out to Raymond and a team over there. That I don't know if they're still there, but shout out to them. I remember we had to get a CPA of like $10, and we had a bunch of traffic. We were doing display advertising, and so we had like top above fold coverage right above the Google back when display was the big thing. But it was super hard optimizing to get a $10 CPA for those verticals they were going for. It was super hard. Super duper hard. And then
so
also
necessary. You need those kind of businesses.
Absolutely. And I wanted to touch on Panda too. So for those who aren't familiar, so Panda was a big update that happened in February 2011. It was basically aimed at, lowering the rank for low quality sites, thin sites, content farms, all that good stuff, and really just wanted to return high quality sites back to the top of the fold and top of the search results.
Well, yeah, just to be clear on that, like before Panda, everyone knew that they were doing the wrong thing. So like what happened with us at Pandas, so we were a journalistic site on automotive content. We wrote like authoritative stuff. We had journalists that were invited to like, Ford's campus to like test drive cars. We were like We were real. We were as real as the New York Times journalists that did the exact same things. But we took advantage of Google in the sense that like we multiplied that article on every single site we owned because that worked back then. And we syndicated it. So we syndicated our articles to the New York Times, which worked back then. But then you get all those quality signals in, and Google's like, I think that you ripped off the New York Times. I don't care what that canonical said. Or we had our content in Yahoo Autos. Like, that's what Panda was. And, Google was they were finally able to say, they took all those quality signals and say, like, you can't multiply your content. Your content has to be high enough quality or you don't get to be in the search results. And, the rules changed. And I think in a good way.
Yeah, totally.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah. So before when we're in the green room and you mentioned this, we were starting to talk a little bit about the conference circuit with SEO, and how it's evolved. I mean, you've been in the industry for a while, been doing conferences. Like, it's hard to get in and start actually like talking about, because you're knowledgeable.
Yeah.
Why is it so hard? Like, what's your perspective on the whole SEO conference circuit?
Yeah, so I love the conference circuit, and I love like I've met so many people in conferences. Like, I know Mike from conferences. Yeah. And then you go to a conference, you see one person, you see him another place, and then you're old friends and you're going out to dinner. Like, I wouldn't like, as a conference attendee, it changed my career. As a conference speaker, it changed my career because they gave me some of the credibility that like I was able to speak at other conferences and go to other conferences. And like the thing I really did at SurveyMonkey was like, I had a certain budget per year to go to conferences, and I multiplied that budget by speaking at conferences and being able to go to conferences for free. And then I could go to more of them. And that was really fun. And like, I really, really learned a lot from that. So there are two things I think that you have to think about with conferences, which is they're all profitable companies, or most of them are profitable companies.
Right.
Yeah.
So like when they want to pick a speaker, they want to make sure that speaker is a sure thing. Or a sure thing from a profit standpoint. So there's two ways that they're going to measure. And I didn't say the second way in our green room conversation. Yeah. There's two ways they're going to measure that sure thing. Way number one is, have you spoken before, and are you great on stage? I don't think I'm great on stage. I think I'm mediocre on stage, but I'm not going to like bomb, right? I hope I'm not going to bomb. You guys work for someone that is awesome on stage. Like, Mike is like one of the best people on stage. He fills out rooms, and like there are all these other people we respect, like Rand Fishkin. Rand Fishkin can say whatever he wants on stage. Rand can rap and he'll on stage, and people show up and like repeat it. Like, they're great people in our industry that are like great performers or great people that share a lot of content, and everyone wants to go hear them, so they come to conferences over and over again. The other thing is the brands, and this is like how I initially got into conferences without actually having like a video of me speaking somewhere. Mm-hmm. So conferences always want to put logos up and say like, hey, we got like people from SurveyMonkey here. We have IBM. We have, all these other public companies. So that's why you go to hear them. Now, I could have said nothing, and my first presentation, probably at a PubCon or an SMX, was absolutely terrible, and I probably don't even have it on my computer anymore. I'm so embarrassed.
You got to surface it. We got to find that.
I don't want to see this. Like, people showed up in that room because SurveyMonkey was talking. I was representing a brand everyone knew. So that's the thing, and that's why it's so hard to get in conferences. And I go so lucky that I got this job at SurveyMonkey. And I'll tell you how I got the job. Like, I didn't go to great schools, and the people that interviewed me at SurveyMonkey, they'd gone to great schools. The reason I got the job at SurveyMonkey was because the person that hired me at Quinn Street, the recruiter, she was the recruiter at SurveyMonkey. So when I applied for that job, she like reached out to me. She just called me. She had my number from like, we worked together for 4 years or 2 years at Quinn Street. She called me. How's the family? How's the house? How are old friends from Quinn Street? Oh, by the way, that was your phone screen. Why don't you come in tomorrow for this interview? So like, I credit so much of my career to luck. Right place, right time. I worked at a company like Quinn Street, met a great recruiter who I was friends with and had lunch with all the time at Quinn Street. That when other people applied for that job, she just put my resume at the top of the stack. She said, here's someone, maybe he's a terrible interviewer. Maybe he's going to show up late and he's going to like have crumbs all over his shirt. Don't worry about it. I vouch for him, and that's how I get hired. And, everyone has ever got a job knows, like, once you get in the room with the interviewer, it doesn't matter whether you went to Harvard or University of Phoenix. Exactly. That's your time to shine and to build that chemistry and connect and, like, let the employer know that, like, they can take a bet on you. So she got me in that room, and then I got the job at SurveyMonkey. And then the rest was all up to me. Obviously, I was good enough to like not get fired and to last there for almost 7 years. So much luck. And, you know, that luck got me on stages at conferences, which got me on other stages at conferences. And, you know, for anybody out there that is waiting for that chance to get out there. So I would say get to the biggest, worst brand you can think of, because then it's a brand.
Yeah.
And then you can say, I work for a brand.
Too. Like, you connect people. I love that about you on LinkedIn. You're always.
I love doing that. I love, you know, building that network. And like, again, like we said, you got to get into conferences and they got to take a bet on you. So if I vouch for someone, that could be enough for them to take a bet on someone. So I love passing that forward.
Yeah. Well, was that something that you focused on though? Was like, hey, look, I'm going to conferences, I'm going to develop my brand, or was that something you kind of just, you know, got into?
Oh, not at all. I had no idea what the hell I'm doing. I look at like all these series of accidents, and I look back and I'm like, oh wow, it all worked out. Like, I wrote a book that I was going to sell to 100 people. Like, I figured like I'm going to spend like 2 years writing this book because I have all these ideas, and then I'm going to go and maybe 100 my family is going to buy the book, and maybe some of my friends are going to buy the book because that's what friends do for friends. And then I'm going to go and I'm going to, you know, pitch to potential consulting clients. They're going to be like, why should I trust you over these other people? And be like, I have a book. It's on Amazon. It's legit, right? And 100 people bought it. But then it turns out like all that other stuff, people actually bought the book. And like, I'm so grateful. But that was not planned. I had no idea that I was going to sell so many books and that, you know, people were going to, you know, share about it and want to hear me talk about it. So series of accidents. It looks like a great plan. If you want to do that, have a bunch of series of accidents. Copy my accidents.
and dude, actually, so bringing it back to the book and product-led SEO. So like, from the outside looking in, obviously SurveyMonkey's a software company, right? Mm-hmm. And so, or SaaS, and like, you know, so much of product-led SEO. Like, I've worked with a couple of companies where like did a review company, and it was all about like links back to the company, and that's product SEO, or a design company where it's all about polls about the best designs. Is it only apply to SaaS, or can you use product-led SEO in other types of companies like e-commerce or anything? Yeah. How does that work?
Yeah, so actually the opposite. I never work with SaaS companies anymore. I think they're with most SaaS companies, there's no fit at all for SEO. And the reason is because the attribution path is terrible. So think about it like this. Like, I once talked to Google Cloud about an SEO role, and I asked them why they were hiring for SEO, because they have two competitors. They have Microsoft and they have Amazon. Yeah. No one's going to like Google, I need cloud software, and Google Cloud's going to be number one. And then they're just going to be like, all right, let me pull out the platinum card and put $1 billion on this and buy Google Cloud for my big company.
Good point.
Like, you're not the CIO of Netflix and you're going to go to Google because they're number one. It's just not going to happen. The way it's going to happen is you're going to find Google Cloud, you're going to read about it, and you're like, oh, that's very helpful, because next meeting is with Amazon. I'm going to ask them all the questions I learned about from Google. Like, that's the way SEO works. So if you spend millions of dollars on SEO, you're never going to be able to prove there's ROI there. And I think at a smaller scale, that's the same problem for many SaaS companies. Mm-hmm. There's no way to prove that there's any value in the investment you made in SEO. I think product-led SEO and SEO in general is a far better fit for publishing companies, for product companies, and I'll give you an example in a second, or for e-commerce. So like, one of my favorite examples of like product-led SEO for e-commerce is Amazon. Do you think like Amazon sat around in like 1999? They're like, all right, 2020, there's going to be this pandemic. So we got to figure out how to build links for hand sanitizer and masks. And we're going to dominate. Like, go Google for hand sanitizer and masks, and they're number one. That is not because they went and created great content and had good keyword density. What Amazon did, and this is very smart that they did, and I've talked to the Amazon SEO team, years ago, is they focused on taxonomy. They focused on hierarchy. They focused on internal links. They focused on how do you take the data sets and the corpus of stuff that's fed into them by the manufacturers and their distributors and distribute that through the page and build great SEO. And Google loved it. And if you want to know what happens when you don't do that, Walmart is what happens when you don't do that. Target is what happens when you don't do that. Yeah. Best Buy, right? These brands, Walmart, Best Buy, Target, they own some search results, but they don't own it results like Amazon. Amazon is always in the top two. And not because Google loves Amazon. Google hates Amazon, right? Google partnered with Walmart and Google Shopping to go build the anti-Amazon, but they couldn't put enough SEO into that. So Amazon is still Amazon. So That's product-led SEO. That's building into the product and not building for the keywords, right? If Amazon was optimizing for keywords in 1999, I think it would have all been adult keywords. But that's not who Amazon became. Right? Amazon was like, how do we build for like the eventuality of having millions of products and being able to rank on millions of products? And like, you know, this is the result of that. And everyone's chasing Amazon, and now they're 20 years behind.
That's a great example. And you actually touched on, you actually preemptively answered one of my next questions, because you said something on the SEO live show with Dre, and shout out to Dre, man, love that episode. But you also said it's best when you go where there's no keyword research. And you kind of touched on it right now, but I want to know, like, why is that creativity so important in SEO too? Because I feel like there's not enough creativity in SEO. I just feel like we do this, we go create content, we make sure it fits for our audience and things like that, right? So why is creativity so important?
Creativity is so important because it's about the users, right? Like, I think this is what I really wrote my whole book about. You want to find where users are searching for, if users are searching. So like going back to the Google Cloud example, like who is searching for Google Cloud and is going to buy Google Cloud? No one, right? There's no CIO that's doing that. Now flip that to like e-commerce. What are people looking to buy? What's the product they're looking for? They're looking for the name of the product. They're looking for the features of the product. They're not looking for the stuff in the review, or unless they're looking for the word review. So you've got to get into the heads of the users, and that's why creativity is important. If all you're doing is focusing on keyword research and what the keyword tools tell you, you've divorced yourself from the ultimate buyer, the person that's going to search and click. And that's what Google's looking for. Google's constantly changing. Like, I know most people in our industry, they use iPhones. I think that's wrong. I'm going to come out in favor of Android right now, and I'm going to come out in favor of the Pixel, which is made directly by Google. And I know Google's spying on me with my Pixel, but that's okay because they make good products. But like, if you are an SEO, and Jared, I'm so glad I'm remembering
privacy, folks. That's it, privacy, folks.
Okay, there you go. Okay. So Jared, let me tell you an example, and I'm so glad I remember to say this. Okay, so I was prepping for our conversation today, and I was lazy, so I was doing voice search on my Pixel, and I said Rankable Podcast. All right, do you know how hard it is to say Rankable Podcast to Google when they're doing, so they're looking for a bankable podcast? There was something about smokable podcast. There's a Google podcast. So what Google's doing is they're interpreting all those things in real time, and results are changing. So like you do a query that may never have existed before, Google's going to try to interpret the intent. And I know Google every once in a while says how many queries are new. I think last time I heard it, they still say 15% of queries are new to Google.
Wow.
Like that's what search is about. It's understanding the users, and then all those new users are going to come in with those new queries. And guess what? If you create something that and that's my product-led SEO hypothesis, you create something that all those users are looking for, you're going to have more users looking, and you're going to have Google wanting to bring those users to you because you created it. And my example of that, and I talk about this a lot in the book, is Zillow. And I learned about Zillow from my early days at QuinStreet, because what I was doing at QuinStreet was my specific focus was on mortgages. And Zillow was in the mortgage industry, but Zillow didn't do things like other mortgage companies. They didn't build links and try to rank on the word mortgage and try to rank on the word real estate. They scraped government data to build information on every single address in America. And when you find every address in America and you want to buy that house, guess what you need to buy that house? You need a mortgage, and you need a broker, right? So like that's the way they came. They built that product that they knew, hopefully from user research, that everyone was looking for, but there was no search volume for it. And there's still no search volume for my address. There's like, the only people looking for the only thing that Zillow is competing on for that kind of search is Google Maps, right? Yeah. Like that's it. So like they built a product which drives, I don't know, it depends on how you interpret it, but let's say 90% of their search traffic is coming from those things. Like that's incredible. That is product-led SEO. That's Amazon, right? Like Amazon, people are searching for Amazon as a keyword, but they're also searching for all those products. That's product-led SEO. Yelp is the same thing. They're searching for like the names of the places, they're not searching for Yelp. And Yelp through that is dominating on all the names of the places that those places can't own themselves because they don't do SEO.
That's amazing.
So to that point, Eli, then obviously audience research is huge. What's your philosophy when it comes to audience research? Like, how do you figure out what people are searching for, whether it's like, their geographic colloquialisms, their, like how they talk, their age groups. Like, how do you like recommend for people? Okay, well, figure out what the users are doing.
You got to talk to the right people. And that's like, again, why I wrote my book, Product-Led SEO. Like, I believe SEO is a product. And when you're in product, you always talk to, well, actually, there's a concept of product market fit, right? So like, if you don't have product market fit, you're just building stuff for fun. So like when you're a product, you're building stuff because you know you have product market fit. And if you're an SEO, you need to talk to those product folks and understand the users and do your research and actually talk to real users.
Yeah.
I'm working with a client right now, and it's an e-commerce site, and they were just doing keyword research. And I encouraged them to like talk to actual users. And they're like, we did. Here are 25 user interviews we did. And now I'm going through that. And now I'm getting the demographic data. Now I'm understanding why people buy from them instead of Amazon, and why people love them instead of Amazon. And now I can create SEO for them instead of like SEO because Ahrefs, SEMrush, any other research tool told me that is what people are looking for.
That's amazing. Have you been in sales? Because I'm so, Eli, I'm sold, brother. I'm about to buy it right now, Amazon. Where do I get my autograph?
Of course I've been in sales. That's what I did at Quinn Street. And I was like, I want to make $50,000 a month with websites in my basement.
You're not lying, man. Like I love you. I love the way you broke it down just now. Like I love the fact that the way you applied the product like SEO, the way that you said creativity, knowing your audience, right? You'd be surprised how many conversations I'm on every single day and people still don't know who the hell their audience is, right? And you'd be surprised how many companies, we were talking about, me and Garrett were talking about this earlier, that marketing, SEO, this shit doesn't have to be so boring, right? Right? Like, so that's why I love your energy, right? And how you're saying, right? Understand what Google's focus is, right? If you understand what Google's focus is in order to provide a better experience for their users, and if you're the one providing that experience to help their users, you're going to be rewarded for it. Same way on LinkedIn, same way on Instagram, Facebook. It's all algorithm. Know the algorithm and work towards it, and then add your own flavor to it, right? There's still going to be some technical things you have to do to get a certain result, but your creativity is what's going to shine through. Like,
absolutely. And tying back to what we said about conferences, like Google is a for-profit business.
Yeah.
Google's not out there to send free traffic to stuff. And if you do good product-led SEO and you're Zillow and you create a really good thing that people want to look for, you know what Google's going to do? They're going to sell ads on it. They want you to do this, right? So Google's all about it. Like, let's think about Google 10 years ago when Bing might have been, not maybe more than 10 years ago, when Bing might have been a threat. They needed you to go on Google and stay on Google and not be like, well, I didn't like the results on Google, so therefore I'm going to go try Bing. That's what it's all about. Google's not about satisfying websites. They're about making sure that users search over and over and over again. And I probably search 100 times a day. And every time I do a voice search on my phone and it works out, I'm like, I'm going to do another one of these. And I don't want to navigate directly to iPullRank. I want to Google it and go directly to the podcast and give myself a click. And when you're satisfying Google, Google will bring the right users to you. When you're satisfying what you think Google wants to satisfy, you're just tasting your tail.
It's so interesting too, because you brought it up with like Google versus Amazon, and that's one of the battles that Google lost, right? Or feels like they lost is Amazon, and Amazon is its own search engine as well. How do people like approach, like, can you apply product-led SEO to Amazon as a search engine?
That's a great question too.
I'm going to go with I don't know there instead of it depends.
Full circle.
So I think that every search engine today operates off the same principles. Google has won the market. And like every time I do a survey on like, Twitter or like what search engines do you use? And I'm like, do you use Google or Bing? And then like someone comes out, they'll be like, I use DuckDuckGo because there's no privacy. There's no tracking. But they're all the same, right? Like whether it's Yandex, or whether it's Google, or whether it's Bing, they're all trying to interpret quality signals and link signals and content signals and user behavior signals to do the same thing. Google has a head start because they've been doing this for 20 years. The only search engine, there's two search engines that are not like Google. One of them is Baidu in China because they do a little bit more pay to play, which that's China. And the other one is Naver, which is in Korea. And the cool thing Google did in Korea, so Naver is the biggest search engine in Korea, and it's kind of like AOL, if anybody's ever looked at it. And like I learned Naver at SurveyMonkey, and I really got exposure to like international SEO. So like there's search, and then there's like blogs that are Naver blogs, and then there's like Q&A that's like Quora. So it's like all embedded. Google's winning Korea also with their Trojan horse, which is Android. So most Android phones are made in Korea. So Samsung and LG, like those are the biggest makers of Android phones. And they come with Google on the phone. And you just kind of figure out that Google's a better search engine than Naver. And before you know it, Google's overtaken that country too. So like all search engines are all the same. So I think Amazon likely uses the same kind of signals. If you do a search on Alexa, on your Alexa device, it's going to give you similar results to if you do a search on your Google Assistant on your Google Home device. And that's because they're like same thing, machine learning, what do users want? So to your question, probably, I just have never tried it.
Actually, do you have extra time, Eli? Because I do.
I'm good. This is great. I want to keep talking.
I love it. All right, cool, man. Because I've got time, man. I wanted to ask you, man. What do you think is the ceiling for voice search right now? Right. Obviously, it's going to explode, right? But what are some things that SEO should be looking at to optimize, or to be looking to in order to start taking over that real estate?
Oh, I love this question. Voice search is not a different kind of search. This thing is all made up. Mobile search, voice search, image search. It's all just search. What it is doing is it's expanding the tail of search into the places where you have to go, where you want to be creative. Another thing on Android devices is Google Lens. It's embedded in the camera, where you could take a picture of something, and Google's a textual search engine. So you take a picture of something, Google's like, all right, you took a picture of a chair, and then it translates the chair into text strings in whatever language your browser set to. It's just doing a text search and finding you other chairs as if you searched it with words. Voice search is the same thing. So the long tail of voice search is like, I want to be very specific. I can say I want to look at Rankable episode number 47 with Anton, or if that was the right episode. And then Google's like, that might not have been something I would type in, but that is something I'm going to speak. So now you have to be really creative. So every time Google satisfies one of those results, it teaches teaches users that you can do those long tail searches. So you could say, instead of saying best places to eat lunch near me, it'll be like best places to eat lunch near me that's less than $5. That is a 2-minute drive away. And Google's going to interpret that as near me, 2 minutes. Okay, I can drive this amount of distance in 2 minutes. And within a certain amount of time, so Google's now saying, all right, I want to take what the best lunch places are and then look in the reviews and look for the word fast, right? So that's what it has done. So that's what voice search is. It's taking voice to strings and really stretching the long tail. So if you want to really understand how to do SEO for voice search, talk to your users. Find out what they're looking for. It doesn't matter whether it's on voice or with image, on a phone or on a desktop. It's all going to be the same thing. It's users looking for something with intent.
I like that answer so much better than what you normally hear, because a lot of people take the out of context. You can optimize for voice search. Well, yeah, but it is more nuanced, as what you said. It's really what they're asking is, you should be kind of optimizing for long tail search for these colloquialisms. There are ways to do it, and with MUM coming out, and BERT, obviously the natural language processing, being able to understand what you're asking, because we talk in a different way than we search. That's just a different type of optimization. Yeah,
and just to throw another product endorsement in there for Pixel phones, they
better pay you,
right?
Man.
I don't pay the man revenue. I should. But when you do a voice search on your phone, and I love doing this, I watch Google change in real time. So I say Rankable Podcast, and Google's like, bankable. Okay. I don't know if there's a bankable. So they're interpreting. I could slur my words. I could be drunk, and Google has to try to figure out what I'm saying. So now they're putting together all those strings. Let's say I say Rankable Podcast episode 48, and Google's like, all right, podcast sounded like basket, but there's no episode when you tie together basket and 48. Oh, there's this other podcast that doesn't have 48 episodes. In real time, it's interpreting what I'm doing. So that's all baked into the phone. And now Google takes all that and they say, you know what, that's really good. We're going to pass it over to the search engineers, and we're going to incorporate that into the algorithm. And that becomes MUM. That becomes BERT. So I use my phone to see the directions Google's going, like Google Lens. I think it's so silly that people are like, oh, you need to have image alt tags on things. How do you need an image alt tag if I can take a picture of a chair and Google says that's a chair? They can look at my website and say that's a chair. One of my favorite searches I like to do, and I do this by voice search, is I live in Texas and I moved from California. And one of the things I have in Texas that you don't have in California, which is bugs, right? Like there's like crazy bugs, and I assume they're all bad. So sometimes I'll take a picture of them and Google will say, oh, that's the Latin name of this bug and it's going to bite you. Or sometimes Google will be like, oh, that one's just in the garbage cans. But sometimes I'll speak them and I'll say, okay, Google, I've got a long bug. It's got like 85 legs and it has 4 eyes. And then Google will interpret that and be like, all right, here's the Latin name of this bug. So
wow,
that's voice search. That's like, and Google knows that I'm asking for a bug. They know that I'm asking for a place to eat. So that you got to talk to users. You got to be real and understand like who you're optimizing for. You're optimizing for that, not for Google.
Yeah, it's so cool. I mean, that. Jared, we could talk about this forever.
I've got 5 more minutes max. I've got 5 more minutes max. Max, if you got 5,
I'm out.
If you got, wait, I didn't bought something I actually should be selling. I've got a lot of this stuff in my book. Go check out the book.
Yes. Please check out the book.
Let me know what you think.
I'm definitely gonna read it, man. I definitely want my autograph, brother. And I would love, like, before we end this off, man, what is your pie in the sky prediction for SEO in the next 5 years? Where do you think the industry's headed? What is something that people should be looking out for now? And what should we be, like I said, what we should be preparing for?
So I think SEO is never, ever going to die because people are never going to stop searching.
Absolutely.
Like I have a client right now. Oh, we were talking about sales and selling. I forgot to say this point. Jared, you're in a sales role externally to clients. A lot of people listening and that will be listening to this, they may be in internal sales roles where they need to convince their higher ups to invest in SEO. Yeah. So therefore, just like you're doing external sales and you need to understand what the client wants, you need to do that exact same thing internally. Your boss doesn't care about canonicals unless like your boss is like a director of SEO. If your CEO only cares about making money from search. And like I have this a lot of times with my consulting clients, they will come in with beliefs. Like I have a client that doesn't believe that their user base searches. They think their user base only uses Instagram. They don't do any search. They don't use Facebook. They only use Instagram and Snap and TikTok. So they only want to be in those places. And I know they're wrong. So I have to prove that they're wrong.
Yeah.
So that's my pie in the sky belief in SEO is that like search is never going to die. We're always going to be searching. It's just going to change. It like, who would have thought, like I think about like when I was getting hit by Panda, who would have thought in 2021 that I could talk to my phone?
Right, seriously.
My phone was be able to do all these things and have a great camera on. It's like, we don't know where we're going to be 5 years from now, but search is just going to change and it's only going to get better because it's here to stay. Like, years ago when you had like a question, you're like, oh, this is a really good question. And maybe I'm aging myself here, but like you go, like, I'm going to go go to the library. I'm going to find out the answer to this question. I'm just like really curious about like, what day the World War II started or something like that. Now you have questions all day and you just get answers all day and you don't go to Wikipedia, you just search. We've become more curious people and Google's always going to be the answer to that. Or another search engine is always going to be the answer to that. So you stay ahead of that. Look where users are going. And that's what search is going to be. And I think that it's only going to improve more. All the things that Google's doing, like Google, I think they said they're trying another attempt at glasses. All that's going to be is searches, like more ways of searching. So you want to appear more. I think Google's probably going to get slapped a little bit when it comes to antitrust. So you get like other opportunities to show up on Google, and that's good. So that's
I don't know, man. I don't know if it's ever going to happen if it hasn't happened at this point.
I have a client. This is the first time I feel like Google really overstepped. I have a client in a space that YouTube dominates that space. So you do a search, and you can go check. I put it on Twitter. I don't want to say the name of the client, but like if you do a search for what this client does, there are 3 pages of just YouTube. That's wrong to me. Like there are other video services out there. If Google has determined the best solution to this is video or audio, they could put Spotify or Vimeo. They don't have to put 3 pages to like the product they own and sell advertising on. That to me, that should be illegal. Like you want antitrust to come in and say Vimeo and Spotify all get a fair shake at this.
Absolutely.
Or Apple or Netflix or whatever. But like I do think Google gets dialed back a little bit, and I do think that like search is very, very much here to stay. No one can predict what it will be like because, again, who would have thought in 2021 we could talk to our phones? Who would have thought in 2017, the voice search in home devices would be a real deal? Like it is. This stuff is all here to stay. There's like go to Best Buy and look at how many shelves they have on like voice search devices, whether it comes from Google or Amazon or Apple and Microsoft. Like no one's investing billions of dollars in these things. Oh, and Facebook. Sorry, Facebook's trying to, right? Like no one's investing billions of dollars in these things if that wasn't the future.
User behavior is weird, though. It's like adoption, right? To your point about Google Glass, and I know, and we could just keep going with all of this, but it's like at some point people are like, okay, I'm willing to talk to these devices, and then once then it hits up and everyone's doing it. Like it hasn't happened with Google Glasses. I wonder if that'll ever be a tech that'll be adopted, or if we get some Black Mirror stuff at some point where people have the contact lenses and they're like, able to see it. I don't know, but at some point it'll take off and be adopted.
It will.
I think it was too early. First of all, it looked dumb and it was too useless. It was like the same kind of stuff, right? Like at the time, you could do all those searches on your phone. So why do you need like a bulky $1,500 pair of glasses to do that? So I think we'll get to the point. And also, like now, there's going to be a different issue with privacy. Like always on recording, is that okay? Because now you're doing voice search. Do you know like how many devices there are out there that are doing like, we all have it on like our doorbells. They could do like facial recognition. We've gotten to a point where like Google Glass is going to be like, you didn't realize it, but you walked by like, this famous person today. And I don't know if you noticed, but like that person was actually shoplifting. Like there's too much going on. So maybe like now it's not okay. Back then, like it couldn't do that. The technology didn't exist, but like maybe that's going to be a bigger issue today.
Yeah, it's definitely, there was wrong time, bad timing for that. Like you said, it was dumb. It was not affordable, not too many use cases. But you hit on, when you were just speaking just now, you hit on one of the main points, right? Go to where your users are. And that's simple, right? And it's too often that people are still taking the same playbook from 2000 and thinking that your customers are going to do the same thing in 2021. And it's not true. The pandemic flipped everything. Digital acceleration has been skyrocketing, right? So you have to be there. And that's kind of like my prediction too for sales, right? You kind of hit on it. The way you sell SEO is you take these metrics, you take these principles of SEO, keyword research, content strategy, audience development and research and all those things, and then you tie it back into revenue, right? How are these actions are going to turn into revenue? And then that's how you sell into the C-suite, right? And as far as sales, what the prediction is for moving forward is going to be like what you've done in your career. You went on the market, you went on the conference circuit, right? You build your brand, you build that credibility. That credibility affords you opportunities to have conversations with enterprise brands. And then when they reach out to you, I'm pretty sure you know it, you don't have to sell. You just have to be yourself, right? Because they already know that you're credible. They know that you're going to give them good information. They know that you care about, you're a genuinely good person because they've been following you, right? So that's where sales is going to be. I think that's where SEO is going to continue to go. So anybody listening, go where your users are. Feel free to adapt. Add creativity, man, and just be yourself and do all those things that Eli was referring to, because this was a lot of gems, a lot of rankable moments today.
It's all Eli's book.
Get the book and buy a pixel and send me affiliate. but yeah, I just want to say, like what you said is like you've gotten better in your career at selling because you've learned, you've had those experiences.
Yes,
and that's what search is. Like Google is not Google 20 years ago because of all that machine learning they've done, and like you acknowledge that, like. Google learns every time we do a search, whether it's on each individual query or each individual URL. Who knows if they do that, but like they're improving. So just like humans improve, like you touch a hot stove and you're like, oh, not doing that again. Google's like, oh, here's the result. Someone clicked number 10 or they went to page 3 of search. What about those first 2 pages were bad? Let's learn. Like that's what Google is. So Google 5 years from now is going to have 5 more years of learning on billions of users.
Yeah. And we can end that. That was this is a great conversation. I know we keep going, man, but I just want to thank you so much, Eli, man. Like this was a great conversation. I definitely have to listen back to this. I can't wait to see the clips and all that stuff, man. But I'm a fan of yours. I'm an even bigger fan now. Having this conversation, man. We're definitely rooting for you always. I'm gonna send you my link when I buy the book, man. Please, if you put a little signature, man, JP, I'd appreciate you, because when you blow up, when you go to the moon, man, I want to be. That's my guy.
Oh yeah,
brother.
Thanks, Jared. Thanks, Garrett.
All right, much love, brother. Thank you again, guys, for tuning in. We'll be back next week. We've got Joe Manna from Nextiva. We're going to talk about influencer relationships and kind of the similar thing we were talking about just now, how to build your brand and how does that go into relationships. So super excited. Eli, thanks again, brother. And, we'll keep in touch, man. And we'll see you guys next week.
It's great to be here.
Thanks again, man. See you guys.
Bye-bye.